Hello and welcome to Resources, Safety and Health Queensland's annual Industry Leaders Briefing. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we are briefing from, here in Brisbane, the Yagara and Turrbal people, and pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. The objectives of this briefing are to share information and provoke thought and discussion. We'll update you on our activities, findings and recommendations, and where we will be focusing in the coming year. For this year's briefing, as we all continue to adapt to COVID, we made the decision to communicate with you through this pre-recorded webinar. While we can reach many more stakeholders in this format, we look forward to travelling to and live streaming next year's briefing from a resources community in regional Queensland. In a moment, I'll welcome the Minister for Resources to provide his opening comments and context. Following this, you'll hear from my team and our guest speaker, Dr. Sean Brady, author of the 2019 review into mining and quarrying fatalities, and whose recommendations are driving reforms in RSHQ's regulatory approach. While the majority of communication is outward today, we want to hear from you and ask that you send your comments or questions to the address we will provide. Please also continue to raise questions and comments in the many forums which exist for industry and stakeholder and regulator. Most of our initiatives require your participation, some need your active support, all would benefit from your understanding of them, so we welcome your feedback. To get us underway, I welcome the Honourable Scott Stewart, Minister for Resources and Member of Parliament for Townsville.
Hello everyone and welcome to the 2022 Resources, Safety and Health Queensland Industry Leaders Briefing. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Stewart, Queensland's Minister for Resources. Today you'll hear important health and safety information that will help us all do better when it comes to protecting our resource sector workers. This is about sharing expertise and ensuring that everyone benefits from lessons learnt. As Minister, the health and safety of our resource sector workers is my number one priority, just as it is for the whole government. So I call upon all of you to make sure it is yours as well. After each and every shift, workers should expect to come home safely to their families. It's as simple as that. That is the underpinning attitude that should inform every decision we make when it comes to operating in this industry. In the past few years, we've seen outcomes of the Brady Review, the Coal Mining Board of Inquiry, which have all made recommendations to help break the cycle of fatalities in mining. Our goal remains there be zero serious harm caused on Queensland's mine and quarry sites. Even though the rates of serious incidences are going down across our industries, we can't be complacent about safety. That's why I call for a second round of safety resets to be conducted across our resource sector in 2021, and why I want these to happen again in the future. There are real opportunities for colleagues to sit down together and make sure everyone is up to date with the latest safety protocols. It is up to everyone on every job site and in every office to focus on making our workplaces safe. In this industry, complacency is simply not an option. This requires us to strive to encourage workplaces that have an open culture of reporting safety incidences, no matter how minor, and without fear of reprisal. While together we can ensure the culture of chronic unease, as described in the Brady Review, is reinforced, and every day the resources industry can become safer and safer. I want to take this opportunity to thank Resources, Safety and Health Queensland for their continued work in making our mine and quarry sites safer. Well, I hope that you'll find today's Industry Leaders Briefing informative, with safety at the forefront of your minds. Thank you again.
Thank you, Minister. Before we move to briefings from my team and hear from our guest speaker, I'd like to take a few moments to summarise how RSHQ is organised, our key government reporting and monitoring relationships, our vision and strategy for the Queensland resources sector, and say a few words about our regulatory approach. Following commencement of the Resources Safety and Health Queensland Act in 2020, RSHQ became an independent agency reporting directly to the responsible Minister for Resources. No longer a division within a portfolio department, RSHQ became separate from the resource attraction and investment activities of government. You'll see that the component parts of the regulator are unchanged, comprising the Inspectorates for coal mining, mineral mining and quarrying, petroleum and gas, explosives, the Safety in Mines Testing and Research Station, our Occupational Health Division, and the corporate function, which supports delivery of our work programs and has exclusive responsibility for developing and progressing policy and legislation on behalf of the Minister. The RSHQ Act also created an independent office of the Commissioner for Resources Safety and Health, responsible for monitoring the performance of RSHQ's functions, advising the Minister, and chairing 2 statutory advisory committees. The Commissioner role is independent of the Minister, just as RSHQ is independent of the Minister, and the Commissioner is also independent of RSHQ. All of this means the Commissioner can fulfil the strategic functions of that office free from influence from the regulator, and that the regulator is not subject to the Commissioner's direction. That is important to ensure that the Minister can receive truly objective advice about safety and health in the industry. External audit is undertaken by the Queensland Audit Office, the independent auditor of the public sector. RSHQ is also subject to the functions of the Queensland Ombudsman as any other government agency in the areas of complaint investigation, public interest disclosure, and administrative decision-making. Finally, also arising from the RSHQ Act is the role of the Office of the Work Health and Safety Prosecutor, established under the WHS Act, with exclusive powers to prosecute serious offences under the resources legislation. Matters for consideration by the prosecutor are referred by RSHQ following investigation. Our vision is for a resources sector free from fatality, serious injury, and occupational disease. To achieve this, we deliver against 3 strategic objectives. First, we are a risk-based regulator with a deliberate focus on reducing serious harm. We prioritise our activities based on risk to workers and the community. This makes a difference to our approach, as we're not an agency that hunts for success or rolls out a rigid and predictable program of inspection. Rather, we look for things which are really bad for workers, and we regularly find those bad things. Sitting outside of industry operations and risk management systems, we discover unidentified hazards, unsafe conditions, and poorly controlled risk. More on this later. Second, we aspire to be an expert regulator, which requires a contemporary approach focused on outcomes, such as serious accident reduction and effective risk control. Again, this is an important distinction, as in the past the regulator focused on outputs, i.e. the numbers of things completed. That distinction is important, as outputs do not reveal whether effort is making a positive difference. We continue to overhaul industry incident reporting and analysis and implement a new unit dedicated to the investigation of serious incidents. These are examples of where the regulator aspires to be expert. Third, we exist to promote improved safety and health outcomes through the delivery of a wide range of programs and services, including supporting industry's emergency preparedness and response, engaging stakeholders to address important issues, facilitating effective health surveillance and digital records, and providing testing, calibration, engineering and training services. We also undertake research with a direction from an independently chaired advisory committee. We'll see examples of delivery against each strategic objective throughout this briefing, most of which are being achieved through close collaboration with you. For the final part of my opening, I'd like to summarise RSHQ's approach to regulating the resources sector. I do this to address a question I'm often asked by industry leaders. That question is, what can we expect from you and how can we work with you? In fewer words, what is your regulatory approach? This is a great question, as our approach has important implications for both of us. We need to consider them so we can best achieve our common goal, the protection of workers. As I've said, stakeholders can expect RSHQ to be preoccupied with things that can seriously harm people. That's what I mean when I say, as a risk-based regulator, we are concerned with bad things. I'm not talking about a failure to strictly comply with an obscure rule. Our focus is harm as an outcome for the worker, which could be immediate and fatal, or it might be chronic, impacting quality and expectancy of life. But it's these bad things that interest us most and which we want to help industry to minimise. In regulator speak, we are risk-based, as distinct from being compliance-based. I find that some people in our industry are preoccupied with compliance, which concerns me, as too often compliance is a one-off activity. Work meets the standard, it gets certified, but we set and forget. Effective risk management isn't a one-off job. In the risk-based legislation which regulates high-hazard industry, it's not a matter of being compliant with rules. History is filled with examples of compliant operations which have experienced disasters, and we know from safety culture maturity models that a compliance culture won't protect lives. In fact, being compliant with rules could mean failing to recognise a risk or a new source of harm. Why? Because no set of rules can cover every situation. That's why our legislation aims not to set a comprehensive set of rules, but requires obligation holders with finding and removing harm. An implication for RSHQ of being risk-based is that we can find ourselves at the limits of the law, where there is no prescription or established rule for how an individual should meet their overarching obligation to keep people safe. We may be asked, show me where it says I have to do this, or even that's unreasonable, so I won't do it. On the left-hand side of the incident bow tie, the consequence of this compliance-based mindset is low. Nothing bad has happened, so the inaction is either validated or invisible. On the right-hand side, the stakes suddenly become high. Everyone wants to know why certain preventative controls, some as simple as fitting a machine guard or checking a worker's health, were not made. An implication for industry of this approach is also very real. If zero serious harm prevails, you may be criticised by your management and shareholders for over-investing in risk controls, failing to meet production goals, and unnecessarily adding to unit cost. If a serious injury does occur, you can take some small comfort that you took all reasonable steps to prevent it. In the years following the Brady Review, we've talked a lot about high reliability organisation, or HRO theory. We've learned that HROs are preoccupied with failure. That means when zero serious harm appears to prevail, the HRO does not start to question their investment in protective systems or allow them to deteriorate. Instead, they become increasingly wary, looking for cracks in the system. I don't doubt this is a difficult concept to include in board discussions that are concerned with profit and production, which after all, boards and companies are charged with ensuring. But boards and their officers are also, under our legislation, charged with ensuring the safety of workers, and rightly so. Positively, in the past year there has been more discussion around increasing incident reporting and of ensuring workers speak up when they believe something is wrong. Ensuring workers can speak up is certainly critical to managing risk, but that's only part of it. Incident reporting isn't just about workers speaking up and filing a report. It's about all levels of an operation, particularly leadership, deliberately seeking out the gaps in their systems, finding the bad and replacing it with good. Controls that are hard or impossible to defeat. The regulator has an obvious and important role to play here, but industry cannot abrogate its responsibility to an inspector. I also hear of some fear of repercussions from the regulator where failures are reported. I'll repeat what I said last year. We will be pleased to see organisations that are finding the bad in their operations and showing to us and their workers that they have addressed it with meaningful controls. We will not penalise a company for finding and removing a harm. It does worry me that I still hear and see some major companies focusing on reducing not only TRIFR or LTIFR, but also near misses as a measure of safety performance in high hazard industry. They are not. I'm also concerned about the varied treatment and terminology for high potential incidents. The Coal Mining Board of Inquiry spent quite a bit of time on this, and I think the public would expect all resources companies to listen and act. The image on this slide tells 1,000 words about losing sight of safety risk, specifically process safety risk. I hope this addresses the question of our regulatory approach, and I truly look forward to your feedback. That concludes my opening presentation. Again, I acknowledge and value your commitment to improving safety and health outcomes in the Queensland resources sector, and I hope you take something from the presentations which follow. The videos in this briefing have been saved separately by division and inspectorate to allow you to target your areas of interest. However, each presentation provides valuable learnings for the sector, and I encourage you to take the time to view as many as you can. Don't hesitate to contact us with your thoughts and comments on the email address provided on the screen. Thank you.